do that.
Yep. Okay, so Melissa Gavin,
Here.
John Burrand,
I am here.
Michael Pomykowski,
Here.
Steve Douglas,
Here.
Kevin Thusius.
Here.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So tonight's agenda is pretty simple, really. After we do some report outs and updates and review and possibly approve the minutes from our last meeting in December, we're going to dive into developing the sustainability plan. And our hope for this call was to start to look at the data and information that members have started to populate the draft plan with, and to discuss the water section and figure out how to buddy up for establishing some of the proposed goals or targets and maybe even activities. So that's the plan for tonight. And with that, we can dive right in, seeing as though we don't have anybody here for public comment. We can just dive into general business. So we've got, so for committee member report outs, we can report out on the conversation that some of us had with Kelly Hilliard from Middleton. Before we do that, does anybody else have updates that they want to share? Steve, was that, you've got something to, an update to give?
Nothing, sorry.
Oh, okay, okay. Good, all right, well then, so Michael, Bill, and I think that was it, right? Just Michael, Bill, and I were on a call with Kelly Hilliard, and we didn't talk about who would give the report out. I don't know if Bill or Michael, you want to lead that report out, or I can.
Doesn't matter to me.
You can go for it, Melissa. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, how about if I share kind of top line, and then we, you guys can fill in the gaps. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so Michael and Bill and I had a great conversation with Kelly. I think it was December 18th. It was just that same week of our meeting of the Sustainability Committee. And Kelly kind of walked through some of the changes that she would recommend, or some, you know, things that they've learned along the way, and things that she would, you know, maybe recommend we do slightly differently. They are updating their plan right now. And Michael, you had asked me to remind her to send it, and I still haven't received it yet.
Right.
So I don't have anything updated right now. But she did talk about, we had some very specific questions, I think, that all of us raised, and I'm just kind of trying to look through my notes now to make sure that I'm sharing what she shared with us. So I think one of the questions that I had for her was, Middleton had these like guiding statements, these maybe more qualitative goals. I forget, let me pull up what they're called in the Middleton document. They're like these, here we are. Almost like vision statements, I think is what they were being, maybe they were being called vision statements. Sorry. And I had asked whether, you know, basically, yeah, vision statement is what they're called. So for each of these categories in their plan, so solid waste, energy, water, they have these vision statements that are sort of like, you know, not quite grandiose, but qualitative at least. And I asked, is the juice worth the squeeze there? Is it worth, you know, it can be really challenging to wordsmith. Is this something that you'd recommend us doing? It was interesting, her response to that, which was that she said this was basically the only thing that was co-created by the community, that the community, through a couple of in-person sessions, and I guess also feedback from the survey, but they actually had in-person convenings within the community, and that's where these vision statements come from. And according to her, that's basically the only thing in the plan that's been co-created by the community. And they're still using these, although they'll probably tweak them, but they're still using these to guide their updated plan. So I wanted to share that. They probably would not, I mean, it sounded like Kelly would not recommend that we try to come up with like performance measures or metrics for every year after we set the plan, that she says there's not enough staff or capacity to go back and measure where they were vis-a-vis their baseline every year after they set their initial goal. And so her recommendation is that maybe it's better to set like goals for 2 or 3 years out, but setting them every year incrementally. There's just, even though she's a full-time sustainability coordinator, she said you would think that would be my job, but I just don't have the capacity to go back and look at all of these indicators and see where we are vis-a-vis that baseline and where we want to be compared to our goal. So I thought that was really interesting. What else? We asked about applying an equity lens to the work, to the plan, because that's something that a number of folks have brought up. And she had some recommendations about what that could look like. There's a group, the Legacy, Bill, maybe, I don't know if you remember what this group is called. I think it's part of like maybe the Wisconsin DNR's program, the Legacy Communities group, but they've got this like a framework called Health in All Policies, and it's intended as a framework to help look at like health equity in all policies in Middleton, and they're applying that framework, and that's one way that they're trying to measure whether their policies are equitable in some way, shape, or form. And they're using it for race, ability, and economic equity.
Yeah, I think they're called the Wisconsin Policy Forum. They do a lot
Okay.
of looking through different lenses and studies for communities across the state.
Okay. Interestingly, in the next iteration of their plan, they may have a separate chapter on climate, which is interesting. And I'm not sure, Kelly said, that may happen, but I thought that was interesting. And then she recommended that we decide on our priorities and then settle on like 3 things within each category, because tracking is going to be really hard. So those are some of the highlights that I took from it. And Michael, Bill, I'm sure I missed a ton. So what else would you add from that conversation?
I think the overall feeling I got was from the conversation, I kept being reminded that their sustainability policy or initiative now is somewhat has graduated from their brand policy, in that they're looking at things more macro now than they are micro, for which I think initially they wanted they start small, and it seems to me that they're in some ways they've achieved that, but they haven't looked back at their measures as much as under the microscope as they had, I think, it originally intended for, in that now they're doing all these things that they haven't even thought about in that plan. At least that was the feeling I was getting from what Kelly was telling, because we kept referring back to the plan, and she she was hesitant to refer too much to it or depend too much on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that, Bill. Michael, would you add anything to that or
No.
qualify it?
Yeah, that's like the exact sort of idea that I got. I mean, I think at one time she said she had been working there for a year and a half and she hadn't even looked at the plan.
Hmm.
And so it seemed like excuse me, they basically would focus on a few issues and try to get those things done, do just decide on their actions that they wanted to do for that year and then focus on getting those done rather than going back and looking at the plan and deciding what to do. Was kind of, so I was reading my notes from that here this afternoon. It's kind of like what I was picking up from it. And with the same ideas of don't get all bogged down and trying to figure out how many kilowatt hours the village is using. Try to focus
Yeah.
on things that'll make it more sustainable rather than chugging through tons and tons of numbers and utility bills.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Michael, because I was, it really sort of cooled me down from, I was going to plug in over the winter break and try to look at some, come up with some numbers. And I sort of put the brakes on it after talking to Kelly and think that maybe we want to, based on her experience, maybe we want to retool a little bit or think about what are the metrics that we want to stick to sussing out and measuring and tracking over time, because they have this 47-page document, but I would agree that it, based on our conversation with Kelly, I don't think they reference it anymore. What she did say is that the plan helped with intentionality, that it helped provide direction, and it helped create and set this intention within Middleton that they were striving towards sustainability, and that they simply didn't have the staff to track things. And so going forward, that she would suggest that we decide on our priorities and that we settle on like 3 things in each of those categories, and because tracking is going to be challenging. She said that the qualitative goals, those vision statements, were done by community input, and it was a community-led process, and that helped create buy-in. And that she would recommend that it be a living document, and that we only bite off what we can chew, and probably create more like I think she said like a 1 to 3 year plan with priorities,
Right.
rather than like a 10-year plan. I'm just making sure I didn't miss any of the other little bits that I thought were insightful. They are struggling right now with public input, or lack thereof, she said, and struggling on which targets to select and how to select the targets, but that they will write it in 1 to 3 year increments. So, and that there's going to be a larger public health section in this new plan. So based on that conversation, like I said, it sort of made me kind of put the brakes on going deep into figuring out like how many kilowatt hours the whole community has used, and the village of Cross Plains, and they had all of these metrics that they used in that plan, and it was a little disheartening to hear that it didn't amount to much. So I thought it was a really fruitful conversation, and thought, before we dive too much further into the metrics, it'd be useful for us to talk about what feels most relevant to include in a plan, rather than, creating a 47-page document ourselves only to have it be something that we don't actually end up tracking. So we're going to dive into the sustainability plan next, but before we do that, I guess, are there questions or comments or reflections on the conversation we had with Kelly?
This is Kevin. I'm sorry I missed that conversation, but it sounds like frankly, it sounds like it was enlightening, and I'm excited, and I see it as much more attainable, what you just described. I see it as much more realistic, and I'm actually glad to hear they're struggling to get public input, because I think we obviously are too, and I think we're fooling ourselves if we think we're going to all of a sudden, bam, get a bunch of public input. I will hope we would, but I don't see it. So I'm actually excited to hear that. And I
Yeah.
look forward to discussing it after we approve the minutes.
This is Steve. That it is very enlightening. It's hard to walk away from. I mean, not that we're not going to have goals. Of course, we're going to have goals, and goal making is make them specific and measurable, and all those smart things you're supposed to do with goals. But then it could get oppressive also. If you have this great list of things that are there, the perfect being the enemy of the good or whatever, let's just get some stuff done, as opposed to having this beautiful plan that's going to sit on the shelf and the staff won't look at it for a year and a half. So I think it's sort of the vision versus reality. So this is super helpful to hear. I saw some really good stuff though that we're going to be talking about. So I don't want to toss that baby out either with the bathwater.
Great. Okay. Well, then we can take the rest of the conversation into the part of the discussion around the sustainability plan. And so with that, let's move on to the second item of business, which is discussion and approval possibly of the December 14th minutes. Is there somebody who's willing to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Sure,
Steve will
I'll
make a
it.
motion to approve the minutes.
Oh, Steve beat me.
Sorry, John, beat you.
I'll second.
Okay.
All right, great. Thanks. Any
My unmute button is
discussion?
bigger than yours.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, great. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so the conversation around the sustainability plan, I'd love to discuss the committee members' data that we already have. We wanted to talk about the water section, and we wanted to talk about possible, partnering up to establish the goals or the targets. In light of the information that we got from Kelly and Middleton and their experience, maybe we want to revisit maybe you want to take a step back and think a little bit more about the structure of the plan. And so I'm just kind of curious if folks have just, kind of off the bat ideas about the information that we got from Middleton and what that makes you think of for our plan for going forward.
So before we jump into that, I just want to give a quick update in regards to solid waste. I did ask well, because I promised I would get to it. I didn't quite get to it, but I was able to collect the numbers. It was to my surprise, actually, that the recycling annual report did not have the annual tonnages for waste. I reported that as part of the report back in Arcadia, but I guess it wasn't a part of this report. But it's not a big deal. It's an elective reporting. But I was able to capture those numbers. I also was able to collect numbers on yard waste, street sweeping, wood chipping, etc. So I do have those numbers. I did not get a chance to put that in at this point, and I guess as part of our overall conversation, would be interested in seeing what the group thinks on, how deep down the rabbit hole we go on solid waste. So And if it's something that we need to collect information on, then, I'd be happy to distribute that to the staff.
Okay. Do folks have general thoughts about this? I guess I'd say I'd characterize it as the scope of this plan. We had initially envisioned it maybe being a longer term plan. We didn't really talk too specifically about number of years to include in the plan or for the goals, but I was at least envisioning as it being, sort of several years out. So curious if folks have ideas based on our conversation with Kelly, whether we want to shrink it in terms of scale, scope, time frame, reflections on what we learned.
These plans off like a strategic plan, you start really broad and big, and that's what we were doing, and then you kind of break it down to goals, and then you got like tasks. We could, we have what, 4 or 5 categories. We could just pick, 1 or 2 things from each category, things that are really attainable, low-hanging fruit, if you will, and try to bite it off in a 1 to 3 year. Just sort of look at it from the bottom up. I guess what's right in front of us. We have this potential solar farm. I mean, that's one that's right there. We've got, there are other things. One of the things that keeps coming to my head is policy issues. We can all spend a lot of time digging through our ordinances and our comp plan and try to improve policies when those come up, or even in the interim. So I feel like there's a couple of sort of low-hanging fruit that could make a difference relatively soon. And so we could look at it from the bottom up, pick a handful of what those might be, and go in that direction. In the next 1 to 3 years, we plan to do these 4 or 6 or 10 things and leave it there.
Yeah, to that end, kind of went out and looked at some of the Monona plan. Not super in depth, but they definitely have a plan and they have overarching goals, but they explicitly say in their plan that each year an annual implementation plan will be developed, detailing actions to be taken in the coming year. I mean, they recognize that early on, that they would go through, pull things out that they wanted to do, and use the broader plan, the bigger plan, as the idea seed, or to then come out and to figure out what they want to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Which it sounds like with our discussions, I didn't go out and do a lot of stuff with Verona, but it sounds like that's what their idea is. They just don't have a plan behind it at all. They just pick what they want to do and just run with that, or run from there.
Yeah, they don't seem to have a standalone plan. Yeah.
They just go right to the 1 to 3 year implementation and just run, start from that position.
Mm-hmm. It really resonated with me when Kelly said, look, I'm the full-time sustainability coordinator. You would think that if it was anybody's job to take a look at the goals and measure where we are compared to those goals, that it would be me. But I just don't have time to do that. And I really took it to heart that we should have a plan that is more digestible, that is something that's more like, in 1 to 3 year increments, that is a little more simple. So we have maybe like 5 categories with 3 to 5 things that we're measuring and striving toward within those categories. But I think that if we are to create, like, basically, like Kevin, like you said, a strategic plan those are often like, 3 or 5 years out, that there would be some sense that we would need to measure where we are against those goals, and that might be too challenging for the resources that we have. So I'm I was really compelled with, Kelly's point about, bite off what you can chew, consider it a living document, pick, pick your priorities and settle on like 3 things within each category. And tracking is going to be hard, so manage for that.
I'm trying to digest a lot, and so I haven't said a whole lot. But I'm going to give an example, and the example comes out of my present work life. I've transitioned from somebody that I worked for 24 years to somebody that's brand new, a brand new boss. My old boss was very much of the, at the beginning of every year, he would sit down and he would create SMART goals. I just did the finger quotation marks thing. And,
Okay.
and what I found with those goals is, oftentimes by the time they actually came to be implemented, they were no longer relevant. And so, over 20 some years of having lots of SMART goals, and I'd usually get 3 or 4 of them, I can actually say that I was really only, by the time it came time to start working on some of these things in a given year, that we go, oh, that one doesn't matter anymore. Oh, no, technology changed. Now we're not doing that one. And I'd only do about 25% of them. So this year, new boss, and we sat down, and instead of creating SMART goals, we created departmental missions. And just to be very, very simplistic, and in an example, one of my departmental missions is to reduce postage and become paperless. And it's up to me to figure out how to do that. And so that just opens things wide open. I have I can think of 20 things, because I have a list of 20 things that will reduce postage and help us become paperless. Some of them are really, really cheap, and some of them are fantastically expensive. That's not my decision to make. I get to propose what I would like to do, and they get to say yes or no. And so I'm actually thinking along that lines for us is, we have 4 to 5 different areas. What if we created like a 4-year mission of, and I can't even make up the things, but under recycling, have a mission. And then we get to kind of decide what, to Kevin's point, what are the easy things to do here? What's the low-hanging fruit to help recycling? Then we can do another one on, transportation, and we can do another one on electricity and renewable energy and stuff like that. And instead of doing a lot of measurable crap, which by the time we get around to it might not be even relevant anymore, or we might not have the time, why don't we just think about, overall, in the long run, what do we want to do? What's our goal? What's our mission? And then once we set that, we can come underneath and we can say, hey, next year, let's do these 2 things. That's what I got.
Yeah, John, that was helpful, because I'd say that analogous to that situation, this committee is you, and the boss is the board or possibly administration. And so we don't get to make a lot of these decisions. We get to make recommendations, find the information, make recommendations, and other people have to make those decisions. They're the ones that answer more directly to the people. In your case, the client, and in our case here, the constituents of Cross Plains, Village of Cross Plains. So yeah, I think I like that idea. Maybe it's that statement that Kelly, I think her name was, mentioned, vision type statement for each of the categories, and with the idea of reduce. I mean, I don't think we need to know how many tons, Bill. We just know we want to make it less. And we could spend a whole lot of time calculating those tons or runoff or whatever it might be, trying to find these answers that are probably going to be hard to find without a lot of help. And then if you get a new engineering firm in 2 years, they're going to calculate it a different way, and we're going to, hey, we did it. They just forgot to carry the one. Yeah, and again, a lot of this stuff is more qualitative than actually quantitative. So I think we're heading in a good direction. At least I hope we're heading in a good direction, and look forward to figuring a couple of those out.
I was initially pretty skeptical of their vision statement, that qualitative statement that they make, and then they get into the quantitative baseline and goals, those numbers. I was pretty skeptical, but first of all, this conversation is convincing me, and Kelly's point, or our conversation with Kelly is convincing me. She said that really that is, to the extent that there was community input, that's where it was creating those different statements, and that the plan really, the biggest thing that the plan did was help with intentionality. And I think that it gets to your point, Kevin, of setting the intention and saying to the board, this is what we want to see. In some ways, could it be even a distraction if we start to set out numbers about where we are and where we want to get, and then maybe this committee is spending a whole lot of time chasing down data and a whole lot less time scrutinizing policy or being creative, or having generative conversations about how we can get to that vision. To your point, John, about giving a little bit of freedom to get creative versus us spending a lot of time coming up with very specific quantifiable goals and then chasing down the data, but maybe at the end of the day it's not as useful. So I'm sort of coming around here. I didn't start there though.
I'm with you, Melissa. I did not start there either.
Yeah. Yeah, with regard to assembling all the numbers and whatnot, I would only say, which I don't, let's going to play the other side for a second. If the numbers are easily obtainable, then showing decreases or increases in what we want becomes advantageous because it shows a completion toward a goal. But it just depends on how much time we want to devote toward gathering them. If it's simply just looking at one piece of paper and you get that number every year, that's a simple way to do that. Whereas if it's looking through 10,000 pages, then it's not. Then the risk and reward inverts. That's all I want to say toward that end, because some of them I think are probably easily to get. Some of them are just guesses anyway.
It's easy and reliable.
Right.
Yeah, agreed. Another thing that I'm thinking about is that one approach could be that we draft up a sustainability plan that is more qualitative in nature than quantitative, but where we can get easy and reliable data, then we can include that with goals, but that it tends toward the more qualitative, visionary side of the spectrum. And if we share that with the board and the community and they say, this is garbage, we need numbers, then we say, oh, we didn't know you cared. Okay, we'll go back and get those numbers.
Nobody came to a meeting.
We didn't know. Okay, join the committee. Come help us get the
Remember
numbers.
when we had that listening session and you didn't come?
So I think that we could, this could be not quite a pilot, but it could be a first version. And if we get pushback from the board or from community members that it doesn't feel like it has enough, it's not robust enough, then we can go back and, you know, deepen it. But I think I'd be comfortable with the first version of it being, you know, something like, here, what if we tried this? What if the plan were more qualitative in nature? So reduce energy usage from village operations, reduce solid waste from the community, those kind of high level things, with some action steps that we think need to happen in the next 1 to 3 years. And we keep it to those, say, 5 categories: qualitative goals, action steps within it, with a, you know, recommendation that we come back to this in 2 or 3 years. And if we get, you know, comments from the community or the board that we need more qualitative data, then we include that in the next round.
What I'm gonna try out an idea, and it's kind of that, and it's kind of a little bit of what Michael was also saying. What if we said, you know, and I'm going to go with solid waste, and I'm going to make up numbers because I know nothing. But what if we said in 2020, Cross Plains dealt with 200,000 tons of solid waste. Our goal is to reduce that. And in 4 years, we will come back and we will measure again where Cross Plains is. And in between that, we don't have to go, oh, we're going to try this and we think this is going to reduce it by 500 pounds. And then we're going to do this one and it's going to reduce it by a ton. And then we're going to do this. We're just going to say, this is where we're at. This is what we're going to do. We don't exactly know how yet, but this is what we're going to do. And in 4 years, we'll remeasure.
I think where we find those numbers and they're reliable, I agree. I'm sorry, but I don't rely on anything that Town and Country does. I mean, you know, data, I mean, I've been out there myself many times, and they don't measure my trailer the same every time. So I don't trust that they're going to measure the weight of whatever we bring out there, if they measure anything. So, but if it's, you know, if it's from our, you know, sewer treatment plant, I think we can trust those numbers. So I would say where it makes sense, yes, but I wouldn't get too, I wouldn't drag ourselves down too far.
I think that's an easy one to say is we don't know because our, you know, our contractor doesn't really give us all that great of numbers. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to put in practices that will help people reduce.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's policy and practice, more so than outcome. I think our outcomes are based in if we can change policy and practice.
Policy, practice, and it comes from education.
Yeah.
And
here's a side, yeah, I definitely agree. Here's a side thing. I've kind of been digging through the Monona plan, and they kind of they do a thing where they break their goals down into municipal goals and community goals. They definitely have a kind of two-sided thing, one dealing with the municipality and one dealing with the community. Just throwing that out there. I'm just looking at this stuff.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, I think there are places where that would be applicable.
Yeah.
You know, Middleton, at least for their energy section, Middleton had that as well. They had the municipal energy use and then community-wide. And then they broke it down with commercial and residential, and there might have been, and maybe there was also an industrial section, actually. So how are folks feeling about this general idea of shifting? Here's what I'm hearing. I want to see if we've got consensus around this, or if we're moving toward consensus, that we shift gears a little bit with the plan and focus on maybe making a simpler, more achievable plan, that it has qualitative goals, that has data where we can find it that's easy and reliable, and that we speak in terms of increasing the good, decreasing the bad, but without, you know, saying like we're going to increase renewable energy by 25% by X year, without getting to that level of detail. And that we include a set of, you know, recommended actions, or actions that we can take to get to those goals. Is that what I'm hearing from folks?
Yes,
I think that's a
Yes.
good summary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
and keep it tight.
Okay, and are we thinking, John, I don't know if you were just giving it as an example randomly. You said 4 years. Do folks have a sense of, you know, how long this report or this plan should go? 3 years to a 2-year plan?
I think let's
4
get
years,
into it
it
before
was,
we make that decision.
I was totally making up that number.
Okay. Okay, and Kevin, you said you want to dive into the report before we make that decision?
Yeah, let's just see where we end up. If we say, hey, you know,
Okay.
it's just we just did this, and this is what we're going to do in the next year. We say, okay, there's a 1-year plan. We say this is 2 or 3. I mean, I don't think we want to go much beyond 5, but you know, 1 to 5 years, and let's see where it comes out in the end.
Okay.
Because I mean, if we keep it really simple and say there's 3 things we want to accomplish in 2021, then let's just call it a 1-year plan and get those 3 things done, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, it may be that.
I really like that idea too. It would not hurt us at all to show some progress right off the bat, and even if I should show some deliverables, and if they're not the deliverables people are expecting to see, then we can quickly, you know, pivot and, you know, sort of present or plan in a different way, you know, sort of the agile method. We could spend 3 years getting the perfect plan. Let's spend 1 year getting 3 things done.
Yeah.
Let's say,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think the one thing that comes to mind, and I know, and we're going to dive into as you know, what we've got so far in the draft plan. One thing that comes to mind is the shorter the time frame we use, the more the more we're going to need people who are already in power to be bought in and able to make quick decisions. So if this were like a 10-year plan, we could build in education of the community and fundraising and changing the budget to develop new programs. But if it's a tighter timeline, then we're going to be really kind of relying on, you know, the budget, this budget and the next budget maybe of the village board, and, you know, very short-term policy changes that can be done pretty quickly. So I don't really know what that means right now for what we're talking about in the plan. I'm just thinking like, who has the power to make quick decisions is going to affect what we can show in the deliverables if we have a short time frame.
Yeah, it's like having the strategic plan is that 10-year plan, and the action plan is that 1-year plan. Again, I think we're maybe getting mired in this too much. I think we should just sort of start getting into some of these and see where it takes us. If it's 1, 2, 3, or 5, it doesn't. I mean, as long as we have very actionable steps for right now. And if we decide that, okay, this is we can't do this in 21, and maybe we can do it in 22 or 23 or 24, but let's maybe we have a public facing, page and a behind the scenes plan for future years. But I think let's start diving into it and see where we find ourselves.
Okay, well, do we want to head over to the sustainability plan draft? I could drop a link in the chat to reshare if that's helpful for folks.
Melissa, you're able to share if you would like.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'll do that. Yeah, that's easier. Okay. So Kevin, you're probably gonna have the stage to yourself here. Bill talked about his section and not having a whole lot yet in there. Likewise, I don't have much to share on the energy section, but just I did drop a couple of things that we could measure or indicators of progress. But and I could just talk about what's already in here if that's helpful.
I think the way any of these would be helpful would be is if we went through one of them, any one of them, and thought about it in the sort of enlightened stage we are after your conversation with Kelly, and try to muscle through what a statement might look like and what, you know, a couple of action steps might look like, and just see where that gets us. And then if that's repeatable, then we can basically do that same thing maybe on our own between now and the next meeting for the other categories.
Yeah, how do folks feel about that?
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds great.
Cool. All right. With that, is there a particular, we've got these 5 categories that we've created in the past: water, energy, solid waste, transportation, and land use and other. You want to start at the top?
Yeah, water or energy, I feel would make good sense.
Okay.
And by the way, for future reference, I think water or land use and transportation may need to be pulled apart, as it may or may not need to. So.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, Kevin. You mentioned that in your email too, and there's each one has plenty to stand alone, I think. So I would agree with that.
Yeah. No, we don't have to go down there, Melissa. I don't want to divert us. I'm just saying, if we were saying right now we have, what was that, 5 categories, we may have 6 in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, there we go, water. Yeah.
So, right. So this is Middleton's. I just wanted to, I don't know if I can bring it up side by side, but I'll leave it here for a second just to read what Middleton did for theirs. And you're seeing Middleton's, right? Is that what is on my screen right now for everybody?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that second sentence really kind of says the whole, well, I guess second, maybe the third, but that second one, I guess, is where you basically have people use less and have, you know, more infiltration of stormwater, right? That sort of,
Yeah.
I think you could simplify this statement into like one sentence.
Yeah, would somebody maybe who could, I can't toggle back and forth between Middleton's and type this, but I'm curious if anybody wants to take a stab. I'm happy to type. If anybody wants to take a stab at either taking a look at Middleton's and paraphrasing, or just dropping one that we can all work from.
I think you can paraphrase the public and private, what do they say, partners, and the Village of Cross Plains will reduce the amount of groundwater we use and increase the amount of infiltration for stormwater in the village. Or yeah, we're all watching you type.
I'm sorry about that.
Good.
It's the worst. It's like, yeah, can't do it.
I'm gonna drop the link right now into the chat for the for Middleton, just so that folks, if you wanted to see what they've got while I'm typing on our Google Doc, you can check that out. Is groundwater confusing to people? I've heard that before, that people don't know what that means? And is it just better just to say the amount of water? Like, is that a distinction that creates more confusion?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe you could just say get rid of groundwater, just use less water.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think it is confusing.
Yeah, yeah. That's an education thing.
Yeah,
And even just say use less water instead of reduce the amount of. Just
yeah.
Yeah.
keep it real.
Yeah.
I don't know about that section there.
I gotta
Would
toggle
be
that.
like the village of Cross Plains and residents will use less water.
Yes.
Yeah.
Municipal and community.
I'm okay the way it is right there. I mean, I really like that simple, truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that the one benefit of the public and private, it includes all factors, including, commercial, business, etc.
Good point.
Are we forgetting that group, or do we want to limit the scope just to the village and residents, or
Good
Remember,
point.
If you add business in there, is that the missing dimension?
it is the missing link.
The village, the businesses, and the residents. What else is there?
nonprofit organizations?
That's what I was
Okay.
gonna say.
Hey, they're
Yeah, they're-
businesses too. As I get defensive.
Other government, other government organizations, you know. Um, but I don't know. Maybe we're kind of nitpicky here, but I think maybe we can get something read first and then dress it up later if need be.
What about this? So I think I'm gonna just toggle quickly back to Middleton's because I think they said, yeah, this piece about keeping harmful substances out of water resources
Yeah.
was, I think that was important. This, pollution basically.
Clean water. We spent a lot of money on keeping our water clean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Could we just, I'm just gonna write
The
water
village, or we could say the village will increase efforts to keep harmful substances out of all water resources.
They also
And
have
it
the
says,
flooding
something
piece
too
in there
about
too.
and ensure development is not vulnerable to flooding. I think that's, I can't understand quite how that's related, but
It's important, but maybe not there, right?
Well, I think that guy kind of goes back to, so when we talk
Yeah.
about water and water resources, what are we talking about? Are we talking about water in general? And we're gonna log in drinkable water, stormwater, and sanitary sewer to this, or do we want to keep that separate? And I don't know. I mean, if it's all three, then it's a large section, but all three are important.
yeah, I would include all water and just leave it as it is, and then on an annual basis, whenever we retarget actions, You know, one year maybe we want to target keeping stuff out of the creek, but the next year maybe we want to concentrate on flood damage and keeping swing sets from clogging culverts. So you laugh, but that's what happened.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've been
wow.
thinking about the swing sets for a long time.
That's part of the reason you got flooded there.
I know.
I didn't know
That's
that.
storage sheds.
And, well, Melissa, you specifically, because it was upstream or downstream from you.
I didn't know
Um,
that.
Yeah, it was a swing set, and what was the other thing? Like a cart. But anyhow, the point is, we have the ability to be flexible if we just say all water. And when we write in new actions every so often, we can interpret it however we want. I think that's the beauty of it this way.
Kevin, what was the first possible action that you gave before the keeping swing sets out of culverts?
Keeping the creek clean. That's what I said.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna jot that down just to, as a placeholder.
Okay.
Bill, I'm curious, you mentioned these 3 different categories of water, so drinking water, sewer, and I think floodwater, right, or stormwater.
Yeah.
If they didn't go under the water category, what am I missing? Where else would they go?
Well, I guess I'm not saying, um, keeping a water, putting it into a different category, but, specifically naming stormwater, because under the stormwater umbrella, you have infiltration and then you have flooding. And then you have, keeping water, groundwater resources, streams, rivers, etc., lakes, clean. On the drinking water side, you have, um, things like making sure you don't have industry that pollutes your drinking water, working with other regional agencies, because where potentially your drinking water sources from is going to be way upstream of you in future years. So again, it's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit here, but do you want to have 3 subcategories under water so that we're kind of clearing that up? Or do we want to keep it as one large section?
I wonder,
Keep it
yeah, I don't
large.
know. I don't think I know enough yet to know.
The 3 different waters are meant, or 2 of the 3 different waters are mentioned in the first one, right? Groundwater use, stormwater infiltration, and the one thing that we're missing is sort of floodwater. And maybe we need to add that to the first sentence. And then I think maybe that's done at this point. And we start talking about some of the actions that are right in front of us that we can take this year or in the near future. That second sentence.
I'm thinking about the
First
flood
sentence.
piece.
I mean, I would maybe add, Village of Cross Plains business and residents will use less water, comma, increase the amount of infiltration for stormwater, comma, reduce the potential for flooding, period, and reduce the potential for flooding.
Does it make sense to kind of work backwards on this water section? So I can share kind of some of the initiatives that we're working on currently. To help us narrow this down.
Yeah.
So in regards to flooding and stormwater management, a couple things that we're doing right now. One, we have approximately 14 acres along County Highway P that that we've applied for a grant to help create a water retainage area to help hold back some flood water. As part of that would be a improvement upon natural habitat and the natural grasses and vegetation that grows there. You know, to me, that does more than just helping with flooding issues, but it helps with the infiltration, helps with wildlife there. So that's you know, it will hear, the village will help hear back from the grant in regards to the grant application here. I'm hoping soon, but I would expect this year sometime.
I think we put that in action right there. We have an action that we can cross off the list. Apply for grant. You know, prevent flooding. Well, I think, Bill, what you just said though gives credence to the idea of having this sort of encompassing goal or about water that includes sort of everything, because you can't just as well say we're going to do this one thing, even if we say we're going to you know, increase the store or the sewer plant's ability to you know get water cleaner faster. That does more than just keep the creek clean, right? I mean, it actually improves, you know, through infiltration too. So none of these stand alone, I guess, is maybe the final answer, or very few of them do. And so maybe we, you know, again, let's keep it broad for vision, qualitative goals, and let's pick action steps in the near term that we can use to help with those goals.
Bill, could I characterize it? Because it sounds like we're waiting to hear from the grant, but if we don't get the grant, is there another opportunity to, it sounds like we're talking about building, would I characterize it as retention
Correct.
ponds? Is that the right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so the way that the strategy, I guess, is that we know that there needs to be something done on both creeks, both Brewery and Black Earth. But there needs to be more water retention upstream, and then there needs to be some kind of action downstream to allow for, in a flood situation, water to escape, you know, at a faster rate.
Yeah, that's, Melissa, where you're at, that's an upstream, you know,
Correct.
issue. And then what Bill's talking about next would be to allow water to get out of the village quicker.
So I guess I don't know how you would categorize it in a sustainability plan, in that it's not, you know, and it's not that this one project's going to solve all of our issues. It's you know, but we need to be actively looking for, and maybe we need to be more broad on this, but be actively looking for opportunities to build projects that are both sensitive to flooding and infiltration and habitat and you know, recreational opportunities, all the above, because they all kind of work hand in hand together. So let me kind of talk about the second project that we're working on here, is cooperating or being one of the major stakeholders with the Green Infrastructure Program through the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, in seeking and finding opportunities to work with, you know, Carpsey, Dane County, the villages downstream, townships around us, the Army Corps of Engineers is involved in this project and identifying wetlands and areas that need improvement or can be improved upon throughout the whole Black Earth Creek watershed. And as part of that, we've identified and received grants for modeling of the Black Earth Creek to be able to identify those projects, those micro projects and along the creek. And I think there's something to be said about that because, as we know, flooding is a regional issue and not necessarily a local one, and getting that train of thought over to the community and to those policymakers.
Bill, what would be, so it sounds like that collaboration is already moving forward. Would there be an action step that you would recommend within that work? Or simply would it be to encourage collaboration with, neighboring communities and municipalities to reduce the threat of flooding?
Yeah, I think it would hit on the latter, and then as those recommendations come out, strong consideration for those efforts.
I'll wait for Melissa to finish typing, but I've got two things. One is we should all remember that, the action items may not be like just this one time, make a phone call, do it. I mean, it's like the action item here is really a sort of Bill attending meetings now or whatever, or doing these things. And we shouldn't be afraid to put those very repeating, I should say, actions in there. And second things, let's avoid words like seek and collaborate and opportunities. Let's try to be really direct. Let's say what these things are. And if the answer is work with CARPC, let's do that. We are working with CARPC to reduce these things, and we've applied. We are applied for a grant or applying. We're in the application process still, I guess, even though it's done. Is applying for a grant to do these flood preventative and wildlife habitat, increased water filtration. So let's be more aggressive, more direct in our actions. And then, because what I want to do here is also talk about like responsible. At some point, we're going to say who's responsible for seeking opportunities without putting everything on Bill, right? And we know Bill has to do some of these action steps, but there are other ones where where others may be able to.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kevin. I think that's helpful, and I would love folks to feel free to jump in and try to change the wording here. But I think that's a great point to I think Steve, you talked earlier about real talk, so using words that are very clear about what it is that we're saying. Feel free to jump in there and try to clean up any language. Within kind of going back before Bill, you talked about, you asked if it would be helpful to share what we're already doing on water as a way to sort of go backward. Is there anything else that you want to share about work that's already underway?
Well, I mean, I don't think that there, as far as hard projects, I don't think that there are any that are underway. I mean, coming back to the water and infiltration, in approving some of these subdivisions, we've taken the step of including on plats information about not only the 100-year flood event but the 500-year flood event, and I guess that's more towards education for people, and that you know, we're encouraging or things like rain gardens in their restrictive covenants. You know, so small steps.
So maybe now would be a good time to, what we talked about earlier was coming up with some kind of more general qualitative goal, and then a few things, not maybe before we get to the actions, but a few things that we wanted to set some, you know, decide to come up with like 3 things maybe in each category that we wanted to track or be aware of. Do we want to do that, or does it make sense? I mean, we could get rid of this whole section and just leave it with the qualitative vision statement and then a handful of actions.
Yes, I agree. Get rid of it.
You want to get rid of it?
Simple
Okay,
is
Steve,
simpler
John,
is better.
Michael?
Yep. I think we're
Okay.
going simple, straightforward.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. John, what do you think?
I am in agreement.
Okay, I'm gonna get rid of it. So that's what it would look like then. We would have that vision statement. I don't know if we want to call it a qualitative goal or a vision statement. And then a list of actions. Okay, if that's gone, do we want to now talk about what are some actions that we could do? We have some generative conversation about what else we would recommend. Conversely, we could put this on pause and take a look at a different topic and try to come up with vision statements for each of the topics, and then spend some time over the next month thinking about what are some of those actions within those topics that we could propose. What's the will of the group? Are you feeling like diving deep on water, or are you feeling like staying more general and visionary tonight?
I'm wondering about the vision / qualitative goals. Start again, going simple. Do you want to just call it vision? Are people outside of us gonna know what a qualitative goal is?
Yeah, just call it a vision statement.
Vision
Easy.
statement or vision,
Or
yeah.
whatever.
Okay.
Probably don't need that other header below there that says actions, because you've got it in your table. Just nothing but formatting, but
Yeah, but it's helpful. Sometimes it's helpful to get rid of extraneous things so you can focus on that. So thanks, Steve. So with that, if we were to do that for all the sections, how are folks feeling now? Do you want to dive into water and start to come up with some proposed actions and crank out this section? Or do you want to stay high level and talk about energy and land use and the other categories?
I think we just dive in on this one. We're started on it, right?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, and partly because I wonder about the next columns time frame, party, cost,
Mm-hmm.
and just seeing how those shake out for, you know, and another action item or two. And yeah, so I'm saying let's dive a little deeper on this one.
Okay. All right.
so that
Steve?
first line item was related specifically to the grant, I think, right, Bill? So the time frame is somewhat constrained by the decision of the grantors.
Well, yes and no. So there, you know, we've been able to identify projects. The grant is only for a specific project, and the time frame. If we do receive that grant within the next, hopefully 6 months here, we know if we have a project to complete within the next year and a half. but the flooding, to prevent flooding is well, that's on our sustainability website actually, and that it's going to take multiple projects. And so, you know, I guess the time frame we could put down as current.
Let me make a suggestion here, Bill, but before you get too far on that one, because I know where, I mean, I agree, there's a whole bunch of steps. This is where I was talking about, my opinion would be to try to keep this thing with stuff that's right in our face, right?
Yep.
And so if 2021, what's right in our face is that we're going to hear about grant number 1, and we're going to have to take some actions in 2021. And then maybe we just leave it that way, you know, and then we revisit this a year from now, or maybe in December, right, when we're looking into 2022. And then we say, okay, in 2022, what, you know, grant number 2 is up, you know, or is due.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, it's like you're not going to not do the grant just because it's not on this plan.
Yeah, well, if that's, yeah, if we want to take that approach, I actually would just recommend, hey, seek us stormwater retains project on the 14 acres on County B.
Yes. Yes, I like it. Sorry, more specific.
Bill, could you say that again so I can
Yeah, so
capture
this,
it?
establish a water retainage project on the 14 acres adjacent to Brewery Creek, or on Brewery Creek, just adjacent to County Highway P. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, all right. And but this only happens if that grant is approved?
Well, I think that the grant is a kind of smoking gun to the project moving forward, but I think that this is an important enough project to continue to think about, even if that grant was not approved.
Okay. And I know that grant time frame, you know, Steve asked the question about the grant, and maybe that would give us a time frame, but I think if we do get the grant, we'll have a time frame, you know, that's dictated by the grant agreement. If we don't get the grant, we should still probably establish a time frame. Do we want to set up an arbitrary time frame of 2 years? I made that up.
I think that's as good as we've got. Throw it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, if you're gonna, we should probably just frame it in the actual year, you know,
Yeah.
2022.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Would that be right? Would we, or it would be December of 2022 if it's 2 years, basically.
Yeah, it would be a grant award and approximately 2 years to complete the project.
Okay. Responsible party is all Bill.
Would this really be the administrator?
It'd be our engineers, right? I mean, who's responsible for overseeing the grant? Isn't that you, Bill?
It would be me.
Okay. I like to use titles here, but I'm happy to use names
No,
if it's
titles are good.
better.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right.
The
Plus,
cost is a
Bill's
big
new
question.
Bill's new title is pretty long though. So.
Oh, Bill, what's your new title?
Oh, village administrator, economic development, and tourism director.
Nice.
It's a promotion. Sorry, Bill.
I don't know if it's a promotion.
You probably have a pretty good estimate of cost since we have a grant out there.
Yeah, $330,000.
That's it?
for this, for just this section.
Not bad though.
I'm going to put that number 330,000. I'm going to put that number in. One thing that we talked about earlier, I think on our last call, was for this cost column that we would do our best and maybe even use dollar symbols, you know, $1 symbol, $2 symbols, $3 symbols to indicate the relative expense of something rather than try to get specific numbers. So I don't know if we want to do that. Maybe we use as hard numbers as we can right now, but at final version we try to simplify. I don't want us to get so bogged down on chasing down specific numbers that it becomes a distraction. So curious about thoughts.
As long as we define what 1, 2, 3, 4 dollar symbols mean somewhere, I'm fine
Okay.
with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that too, because I think, you know, in especially documents like this where you put down numbers, you know, sometimes you're kind of held to that. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You said it would be this much, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So are we ready to go to the next action, or is there any more conversation about this one? Okay, I'm going to move us
Move
on
on.
then. Yeah, let's move on. So let's talk about working with CARPC. And did I get that acronym? I bet there's a hyphen or some different way.
Oh, you got it right.
I did. Okay. Is there a better way to characterize this?
no, I think that captures that. I mean, it's broad enough that, you know, we can work within that on multiple different efforts with CARPC instead of just the one.
Okay. I think Middleton might have done something. I often do this when I have to list a time frame in my own plans. Sometimes I'll say ongoing, which sort of feels like cheat and also feels realistic. But this seems like an example of when it would be useful. Kevin, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, I use ongoing too, and I hate it when I use it myself. But if going back to the, I'm sorry to go backwards too. I didn't like the December 2022 because that's a deadline, not a time frame. And so really what we're doing is we're
Okay.
working on that in 21 and 22. And with CARPC, is to get rid of, to avoid saying ongoing, I would say 21, 22, 23 maybe, knowing that it's going to probably take 3 years, and then we'll revisit it during that time. And maybe have to push it out to 24, 25, 26.
Yeah.
It avoids
Okay.
ongoing,
All
which
right.
does sound like a cheat.
All right. How does that look? Can we just do ranges, or do you want the individual years listed?
Okay with ranges,
Okay.
because then you can pick when to start. I mean, if we you know, if we list an action item that, you know, for whatever reasons, you know, it doesn't get started in 2021, you know, we have that flexibility, and it's not time restricted.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Bill, I'm guessing this is also you. I mean, you're pretty much the direct contact with CARPC, or is there somebody else who might be bottom lining this relationship?
No, yeah, it would be me.
So we should rename it Bill's plan.
There'll be other things that won't be Bill, I hope.
This is what
Bill's-
happened to our flood management plan in Arcadia too. You know, we went through it, and unfortunately for smaller communities, it ends up being, you know, that person in that village administrator position.
Yeah, there's some of this that'll fall to our consultants, our contractors, and to Public Works too at some point, I'm sure.
Yep.
With this working with CARPC though, I would imagine that the big cost here is your staff time. Is that right, Bill?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm just gonna make a note here. And
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to get to some, I'd really, really hope we don't get to some kind of calculation there. So maybe it's okay just to leave it at staff time, but let's put that there for now. So at least the village knows what that, what the cost would be. Anything else on this action?
So I'm gonna kick something out there, maybe for some debate here. But this whole notion of stormwater and potential flooding, there's different developments that are going, within the floodplain. And when we talk about floodplain, it's floodway and flood fringe. Um, you can develop in the floodway, you can develop in the flood fringe by floodproofing or raising. Our current village ordinance allows you to do that in the flood fringe. In notion with policy review and getting more restrictive on some of these flood water protection, stormwater protection, things like infiltration rate on a property, we're limited by what, state statute says on that. For example, state statute requires a 90% infiltration rate. I think the village had 100% previously, but we found that we wouldn't be able to implement that. But in regards to actually building or not building in the flood fringe, that's totally within the village's power to do that, if it likes to do that, by amending the floodplain ordinance. That's something that we want to have some discussion on here. And if it's a bad idea, just shut me up right now.
No, Bill, thank you. I was bringing this up earlier and I sort of forgot about it. I think this is where this committee can get into, you can put responsible party, sustainability committee members. Because we can all go through the ordinances and start looking for these. You brought one specific one up here, but there could be others. I guess I appreciate maybe trying to be specific in the action item, but I think one action could be just review all of them, or all the relative ordinances. But if you want to pick that one up, I think that's great. I think this is exactly what we should be doing.
Would it be zoning?
Yeah, so we have a separate floodplain zoning ordinance,
Yeah.
chapter 85.
And is that, and floodplain and flood fringe are different things?
Yeah, so the floodplain includes the general floodplain, the includes the flood fringe, which is what gets flooded by the 1% flood, and then the floodway. And to think about that is, so at a 1%, which is the 100-year flood, the floodway is where water is moving. The flood fringe is where water is standing.
Yeah. Bill, does she have the action step right there, or is it just a floodplain zoning ordinance period?
Yeah, it's just a floodplain zoning ordinance period.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the flood fringe would be found within that.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And then we do have a shoreland zoning ordinance, but the shoreland zoning ordinance generally would refer to the floodplain if the floodplain zoning ordinance is more restrictive, which it is. So
I'm gonna
So-
guess. I'm
Yeah.
gonna guess on a time frame there.
No, that's absolutely something we can do this year. That's great. Is our job is the action to review it, or is our action to make a recommendation?
I would say review and recommend.
Okay. Great. Awesome.
Nice.
What about an action related to keeping harmful substances out of all water resources? Would that be something like keeping additional phosphorus out of the creeks? Reducing runoff? What would that look like?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go with that. You know, you could have a more, I guess you could have a more general action or goal in specifying pollutants or types of pollutants. Generally, there's probably going to be regulations out there that restrict that already. You know, we may want to take a look at things that are more direct, like 15-foot vegetative buffer, you know, for every property, or you know, I think that within the scope of pollutants and runoff, you know, what's in the village and within our control, I think it may make sense to be more specific,
Mm-hmm.
because you're kind of digging, yeah, you're digging into a lot of science.
I also, I think we should have something in here, but we also will have to, you know, this is water. We've got 3 now. This will be a 4th, you know, and how many can we do in 2021? So then it becomes the prioritizing, and then that's where it becomes strategic, right? So we're basically making the same strategic plan from the ground up. And I don't know where to go with this one, because I've gone all the way from, you know, let's just simply recommend buffers along all the creeks that we have and waterways we have, period. You know, basically trying to get the citizenry to do something. Or, you know, buffer between your lawn and the road, and, you know, leave the last 5 feet tall. I don't know. You know, so but maybe here's where we have to go a little more generic, like we do have to do a little research. You know, action is to determine the best way to reduce, for citizens to reduce harmful materials from entering the water bodies. And we can spend, you know, a year or 2 or whatever it takes to try to figure out what those are, because there's a lot of them, and I guess I'm not prepared today to even guess what the best way to spend our time is. You know,
Yeah,
which one?
definitely.
Yeah, but I think you bring up a good point in that, you know, the village can do what we can do to try to reduce pollutants and provide a buffer, but it's only along the sections that the village owns. I mean, there's large sections of the village that private property abuts or owns, um,
Yeah.
you know, riverfront. And so I've had people call in and ask for advice on what to do on that stream front or riverfront, and being able to provide them with resources and education on you know what the overall goal is here, I think is beneficial.
Yeah, I think our engineer might be helpful, or planner might be helpful in this one too, because they've probably done this in other communities, and there might be just we might even have the resource already, but we have to look at it and find it. And then we can
So,
make recommendations to the citizens.
yeah. So I do a time check here at 7:35. My recommendation is we wrap up the conversation on water, and then we hold the rest of the plan for our next month's meeting. And between now and then, we think about what the remaining vision statements could be, and brainstorm some of those actions. But I don't think we're gonna, I think stopping at water, or putting a bookmark in water for tonight's probably gonna be pretty good. Also, when I wanna mention, we've talked about flooding, we've talked about pollutants, we haven't talked about reducing water use, which is the first sentence of our vision. So it would be good to think about. I in Middleton, it was interesting. Kelly said that some of the biggest bang for their buck in their plan were actions around um, like toilets and water audits, and that's like no longer relevant to them because I guess this plan was 10 years ago. Toilets have come a long way, but that's where they found some of her words were biggest bang for their buck was around helping people with like replacing their toilets and conducting water audits.
Yeah, Melissa, if you want to just jot down quickly here, we do have currently a water system survey that the village board approved, and we should be hearing back on that, I believe, at the end of January here. Town and Country will report back on that.
So that would be, what would that, it would show how many gallons an average home is using?
Well, no, it's an audit on our water system to see if there's any waste and
Okay.
potentially, where we could be having savings.
The whole system, not just municipal use, is what you're saying, Bill.
Correct.
Yeah. So, are we losing water on the down the drain? Pun intended. We could almost take this determine best ways for residents to reduce harmful pollutants and change that out for reduce water use and spend a year, because again, unless you all know, I don't know how to, well, I guess I know how to reduce it in my house. So maybe we just apply that broad scale, just to educate people.
So maybe it's education for I don't know, host education programs to reduce water use. I'll put that as a placeholder.
Yeah.
Yeah, we remember from the survey, there was a lot of stuff about educating in the survey on a broad array of topics.
Good point, Michael.
I think that's going to be coming up as an action in a lot of these categories.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's good at drawing. We can have like a cartoon plunger called Plungy. That's how we're going to get the best bang.
Gotta have a good mascot.
Yeah, that's right.
Look what they did with that gecko.
Without it.
Ours could have a total Scotty accent too.
Oh yeah. Gotta be overly happy.
Is this survey, it's already paid for, right? Is there's no additional cost at this point in 2021?
I think was it 14,000, Bill?
Yeah, I don't remember off the total cost off my head here, but it factored in to that budget. So
Is it like, I wouldn't, I think I wouldn't include it as a cost because it's behind us. I see this as a tool, but maybe I'm thinking about it very differently. I see this as a tool to share with the board to say, to help make determinations about what we should do. But if the cost has already been, the survey's already been paid for, right? Or that's already been approved.
It's
would-
already been approved.
Is
And
there,
what budget, Bill? FY 21 or 20?
21.
I'd put it in. It's
You
a
put
real
it in?
cost for now anyways.
Okay.
It may turn into a single dollar sign later on, right?
okay. Was it 14,000? Is that the right number?
Michael, you always have the budget seemingly memorized, so
That I don't remember because that was part of a
yeah.
collection of a water amount that was like over $100,000 because it was combined with the drilling of the well or the test well, I think, and
Yeah.
a bunch of things all grouped together.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is our engineering consultant. Yeah.
Yeah, I can find out and let the group know. It's in my notes somewhere.
Okay.
Oh, you can take my name off of that one. That's public works and or public facilities and town and country engineering.
Do we want to have the exact name of the firm, or can we just say?
I'd say engineering consultant.
Okay. So if we were hosting programs to reduce water use, this seems like the kind of thing we'd want to think about who the partners are. And it also sounds like an ongoing thing. So I would be inclined to list, as we did in the earlier actions, every year we aim to host a program a year or a couple programs at the library or something like that. Is there another way to make this come to fruition?
You're already getting to the point of hosting programs where I'm to the point where I'm not quite there yet. I'm like, is hosting the programs the best use of our time? How
Okay.
else can we educate? So
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm still under like determined. I hate to use the word determined, it's so soft, but maybe just educate then. Educate the public or the residents on ways to reduce water use. And we can figure out, if it's hosting a program or if it's, creating Plungy the cartoon.
Every single one of these categories can have its own character, and we have a group of them.
You can, a little clean drop of water, a dirty drop of water.
Like action figures.
I'll
So
draw up the
sustainability
Brewery
action
Creek one. I'll figure something out there.
We
Guess
could
we're all
sell
gonna-
the action figures to sponsor solar panels on roofs.
Brilliant.
Sonny. Sorry. I'll come up with names. I can't draw.
So this education piece, I would probably put that in the sustainability committee in our bucket.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking you can get rid of members too. I just think sustainability committee is sufficient.
Yeah.
I said that earlier, but I regret saying it now.
I would say that there probably could be there would probably be a small dollar sign here, but I think
Yep.
if there was a budget, it would be helpful. So
Yes.
I'm not sure. I'm gonna write small budget without having any dollars to attach to it right now. All right, folks, it's 7:45. I feel like we've put in a lot of good work here. I'm going to recommend that we put a bookmark in it for now that we come back and on our next call, tackle the next couple of categories.
Is it worth anybody trying to take a stab at the vision statement before we get there, so we've got something to react to?
Really good suggestion.
I would be willing to do it for the, or maybe I did it already.
Let's take a gander.
I did.
You did.
All right, but now that we're in our new format, well, maybe that's good enough. I would go back and look at it and see if it fits what we're looking at now.
Okay. Then in that spirit, Kevin, I'll volunteer to write a vision for the energy section.
I need a vision for energy right now. I'm ready to fall asleep.
I'm feeling you.
I can do so for solid waste.
Nice. Okay.
Do we need one for transportation?
Yeah, what do we think about separating those out?
I think I've got one in there already. I'll just, unless somebody else wants to try it or use what I have, I'll stab at that one unless somebody else wants to. I think I already put one in there. I put 2 sentences in there. One's for land use, one's for transportation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then we just have this other category, which feels like not a good use of time to try to come up with anything here, unless somebody's inspired.
What I can do is check out those other plans and see if I can figure out anything that would be an other category and come up with something. Just
That's
kind of
great, Michael.
just, because I noticed that some of them have other ones. Monona, I think, just said general sustainability, which I really, off the top of my head, don't know what. So I could just see what happens, just kind of look at between the 2 plans and maybe mash something up.
Okay, that's
So
great.
just give it a thumbs up or thumbs down if we think we want that category or not, or what.
Yeah, and Michael, you may find that it's our municipal. Never mind. I'm gonna forget it. I'm gonna stay quiet.
So Kevin, I kind of hate to get rid of this whole beautiful table that you populated, but
Yeah, there might be some nuggets to keep in there. Who knows?
so do you have it someplace else? If I were to delete it from this place, is there anywhere else where it's
I
compiled?
saved it in triplicate and it's on my backup on my back. No, this is it. So if you feel like deleting it, it doesn't matter. It's just black and
I
white.
thought there was some good stuff in there that
Yeah.
maybe not now, but
Okay.
let's at least archive it.
Okay. We'll keep it for now.
And
when
that was a nice effort there.
When we talk about this section, we'll see what's useful to keep. So I won't get rid of it for now, but I will get rid of these other tables in the other sections that haven't been populated. Okay, so here's our plan. We are going to put some thought into writing visions for each of these categories. So Bill's going to take solid waste. I'm going to take energy. Michael's going to take other. Kevin's going to revisit land use and transportation and update it as it seems like a good idea. And we'll all come back to this document on our next call and try to get a little further afield on each of these categories with coming up with some actions. I'd also suggest that if this is if you are writing the vision, that maybe you put some thought, Kevin, I don't know if I'd encourage you to do any more thinking about action steps because you've got a long list already. But but for others like me, if it's your category to write the vision, put some thought into some actions to just pitch to the group for further dialogue. And if you don't have a specific assignment and you want one, speak up. Otherwise, you get to do something else fun. We'll figure it out. You won't be excluded. All right. Anything else on this for tonight?
Very good, everybody.
All right.
think it sounds
Good
good.
deal. Well, then I think we can adjourn,
Motion to adjourn.
especially if there's a motion. Great. Okay. Anybody second?
I'll second.
Great. All right. Motion, I don't think they're all in favor of adjourning. Say aye.
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye. All right. All right. Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you again in a few weeks. Bye.
Take
good.
care,
Thank
everybody.
you all.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
See you guys.